The distress beacon screamed through the void of space like a wounded animal crying for help. Lieutenant Commander Maya Brooks stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the signal pulse on her screen. Her crew had been 3 weeks into deep space reconnaissance when they picked up the call. Nobody had ever heard a signal pattern like this before. Maya was 32 years old with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen too much death. She had joined the military after her baby sister died in a colony raid when Maya was just 18. That loss had carved something hard and sharp inside her heart. She became a soldier because soldiers protected people, or at least they tried to. The mysterious vessel appeared on their scanners an hour later. It was beautiful in a way that human ships were not. Where human vessels were all sharp angles and brutal efficiency, this ship looked like it had been grown rather than built. Elegant curves and spiraling towers made it look more like a piece of art than a war machine. But when they docked and entered through the airlock, Maya saw that something terrible had happened here. Bodies lay everywhere. The aliens were humanoid, but clearly not human. They were tall and slender with skin that seemed to shimmer with pale light. Their faces were almost too perfect, like living sculptures. Pointed ears swept back from delicate features. They reminded Maya of the elves from old Earth stories her mother used to read. Blood covered the walls. Some of it was red like human blood, but some was silver and seemed to glow faintly even in death. The attack had been recent. Maybe only hours ago. Maya moved through the corridors with her team, checking each body for signs of life. They found none, until they reached the cargo bay. A sound caught her attention. It was soft, barely audible over the hum of the ship's dying systems. Maya raised her hand and her team stopped moving. She listened. There it was again. A whimper, the sound a frightened child makes when they are trying very hard not to cry. Maya approached slowly, her weapon lowered. She did not want to scare whoever was hiding. Behind a stack of cargo containers, she found them. A small figure huddled in the shadows with something else pressed against her side. The child was tiny, maybe 4 feet tall at most. She had the same pointed ears and perfect features as the dead aliens throughout the ship. Her hair was long and white like starlight. Her eyes were huge and silver and filled with terror. She wore a torn dress that might have been elegant once but was now stained with blood and dirt. Pressed against the child's side was a creature that made Maya's team raise their weapons. It looked like the dragons from Earth legends but smaller, about the size of a large dog. Its scales were deep red with edges that glowed like hot coals. Small wings were folded against its back. Its eyes were the same silver as the child's eyes, and they watched Maya with intelligence and barely controlled rage. Maya held up her hand to keep her team from shooting. She lowered her own weapon and took off her helmet so the child could see her face. She tried to smile but knew it probably looked wrong. Maya was not good at gentle things anymore. The child screamed. It was not a sound of surprise, but of pure terror. The dragon creature lunged forward with a shriek that hurt Maya's ears. Claws extended from its paws, each one sharp as a knife. Fire gathered in its throat. Maya could have shot it. Her team wanted to shoot it. But she saw the way the child's hand was wrapped in the creature's mane. She saw the terror in both sets of silver eyes. These were not enemies. They were victims. They were frightened and alone, and they had already seen too much death. So Maya dropped her weapon entirely. She spread her arms wide to show she meant no harm. The dragon hit her chest with the force of a small missile. Claws raked across her armor, finding gaps and drawing blood. Fire singed her face and hair. Pain exploded through her body, but Maya did not fight back. She just held her ground and kept her eyes on the child. The attack stopped as suddenly as it began. The dragon pulled back, confused. Its small chest heaved with exertion. Maya was bleeding from a dozen cuts, but she stayed very still. Her team was shouting at her to move, to let them shoot, but Maya raised her hand to stop them. She looked at the child and spoke softly. Her voice was rough from years of shouting orders, but she tried to make it gentle. She did not know if the child understood human language, but maybe tone would be enough. The child stared at Maya with those huge silver eyes. Something passed between them in that moment. Maya did not know what it was, but it felt important. The child saw the scars on Maya's face and the old grief in her eyes. Maybe she recognized another person who had lost everything. Maybe she just saw that Maya could have hurt them but chose not to. The dragon creature made a sound that was almost a question. The child whispered something in a language like music and bells. The dragon settled down but stayed between Maya and the child, watching with suspicious eyes. Maya's medical officer came forward slowly with supplies. Together they tended to the wounds on both the child and her dragon. Neither of them fought anymore. The child's name was Lyra. Maya learned from the ship's damaged computer systems. She was the daughter of someone important, though the translation was unclear. Princess or counselor or something similar. The ship's logs told a horrible story. Lyra's people were called the Velkari. They were peaceful explorers who had run into something terrible out in the dark spaces between stars. An empire called the Krell Dominion had decided that the Velkari needed to die. Not for resources or territory, but because the Krell believed only the strong deserved to exist, and the peaceful Velkari were weak. The Krell had been hunting the Velkari across multiple star systems. This ship had been carrying refugees trying to escape. It had not been fast enough. The Krell had boarded and killed everyone. Almost everyone. Lyra's father had hidden her in the cargo bay with her bonded companion. The dragon creature was called a Strix, and its name was Ember. Among the Velkari, children bonded with Strix through telepathy and emotion. They were partners for life. Ember had protected Lyra as her father had asked before he died fighting the Krell. Maya made a decision then that would change everything. She would bring Lyra and Ember aboard the Valiant. She would protect them. Earth Command would probably be angry. There were rules about interfering with alien species and politics. But Maya had spent 14 years following rules and watching people die anyway. This time she would do what felt right instead of what was ordered. This child had lost everything, just like Maya had lost her sister all those years ago. Maybe Maya could not save everyone. Maybe she could not bring back the dead. But she could save this one frightened little girl and her dragon. As they prepared to leave the dead ship, Lyra reached out and took Maya's hand. Her fingers were small and cold and they trembled, but they held on tight. Ember walked beside them, no longer hostile but not yet trusting. Maya's team exchanged worried looks but said nothing. They knew that look in their commander's eyes. She had made up her mind. The Valiant undocked from the Velkari vessel and set course for the nearest human station. In her quarters, Maya cleaned her wounds while Lyra watched from a corner with Ember, curled protectively around her. The child had not spoken since they left her ship. Maya did not push her to talk. Sometimes silence was all you had left after tragedy. Maya looked at the little alien girl and her dragon and wondered what she had gotten herself into. She did not know that she had just started something that would change the fate of multiple species. She did not know that the frightened child in her quarters would one day become the bridge between two civilizations. All Maya knew was that she had made a promise without words. She would keep Lyra safe, no matter what it cost, no matter who tried to stop her. The little alien girl had lost her family to monsters. Maya would make sure she never felt that helpless again. Outside the viewport, stars streamed past as the Valiant jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, the dead Velkari ship drifted in the darkness. Ahead of them lay a future none of them could predict. But for now, in this moment, one small act of mercy had been completed. Maya had found something she thought she lost forever when her sister died. A reason to be more than just a soldier. A reason to protect instead of just fight. And Lyra had found something she desperately needed. A guardian. A protector. Someone who looked like a monster, but acted like a hero. The war was coming, but neither of them knew that yet. Life aboard the Valiant was not easy for Lyra. The human ship was nothing like her home. Everything was metal and harsh angles where Velkari ships were smooth and alive. The lights were too bright and flickered in a way that hurt her sensitive eyes. Worst of all were the sounds. Boots stomping on metal floors, weapons being loaded and cleaned, voices raised in anger or laughter, both of which sounded violent to her traumatized ears. The humans themselves terrified her. They were so much bigger than Velkari, so much louder and rougher. They moved like predators even when they were just walking to get food. Every single one of them carried weapons openly, something no peaceful Velkari would ever do. To Lyra, the entire ship felt like being trapped in a cage with sleeping tigers. Ember felt it too. The Strix refused to let any human except Maya come close. He hissed and showed his fangs whenever someone approached. His scales would heat up until they glowed red with warning. The crew started calling him the Little Dragon and gave him plenty of space. Maya had moved Lyra into her own quarters, which were small but private. This caused some grumbling among the crew. Commanders usually got their own space, and it was considered a privilege. Sharing that space with an alien child and her dangerous pet seemed foolish to many of the soldiers. But Maya did not care what they thought. She had seen the way Lyra shook whenever too many people were around. She had watched the child wake up screaming from nightmares about the Krell attack. Someone needed to look after her, and Maya had decided it would be her. What Maya did not understand at first was that Lyra could feel emotions the way humans could hear sounds. It was a Valkyrie ability that all of them shared. They could sense fear, anger, love, and hate radiating from other beings like heat from a fire. This made them incredibly empathetic, but also incredibly vulnerable. Lyra could feel the violence that lived inside every human on the ship. It was not that they were evil or wanted to hurt her, but humans had evolved on a harsh world where survival meant being willing to fight. Every human carried the capacity for terrible violence just beneath their calm surfaces. To Lyra, being surrounded by humans was like being surrounded by loaded weapons that could go off at any moment. Maya was different, though. When Lyra focused on her, she felt something complex and layered. Yes, there was violence there. Maya was a trained soldier who had killed before and would kill again. But beneath that was a deep well of grief and an iron-hard need to protect. Maya had lost someone important long ago, and that loss had shaped everything she became. Lyra learned about Maya's sister during one of their quiet evenings together. Maya showed her pictures on her datapad. A young girl with dark hair and a bright smile. Her name had been Sophie, and she died when raiders attacked her colony. Maya had been away at basic training and did not get home in time to save her. That was why Maya became a soldier. Not to hurt people, but to protect them. Not because she loved violence, but because she hated loss. Lyra understood then why Maya had saved her. She saw her dead sister in every victim she could not help. Protecting Lyra was Maya's way of keeping a promise she made to Sophie's memory. Understanding this made Lyra less afraid. Maya looked like a monster with her scars and weapons and hard eyes. But underneath she was someone who cared deeply, who felt loss as powerfully as any Valkyrie. She was dangerous, yes, but she was dangerous in the way a guard dog is dangerous, only to threats, never to those under her protection. Days turned into weeks. Lyra slowly began to adapt to human life. She learned basic English words and phrases. She learned that humans showed affection through actions rather than telepathy. Maya would bring her favorite foods from the mess hall or fix her hair in the mornings. These small gestures meant more than words. Ember began to tolerate Maya's presence too. The Strix could sense Lyra's growing trust and followed her emotional lead. Eventually, Ember allowed Maya to pet him, though he still growled at everyone else. His scales would cool down when Maya was around, and sometimes he would curl up at her feet while she worked. But peace never lasts in war. The Valiant had been patrolling the border regions when their sensors picked up Krell signatures. 3 scout ships were heading toward a human mining colony. Captain Linda Hayes ordered battle stations, and the Valiant moved to intercept. The fighting was brutal and fast. Krell ships were heavily armed, and their warriors were even worse. They were massive creatures 8 feet tall with 4 arms and armor-plated skin. They did not take prisoners, and they did not show mercy. They believed strength was everything and weakness deserved death. The Valiant managed to destroy 2 of the scout ships, but the third one got through their defenses. It docked with the Valiant like a parasite, and Krell warriors poured into the corridors. The crew fought back with everything they had, but the Krell were incredibly strong and hard to kill. Maya had left Lyra in her quarters with strict orders to lock the door and hide. She ran toward the fighting with her rifle ready. The corridors became a nightmare of gunfire and screaming. Maya fought like a demon, protecting her crew and pushing the Krell back inch by bloody inch. But one Krell warrior broke through the defensive line. He was smarter than the others, and had studied the ship's layout. While everyone was focused on the main battle, he slipped away and headed for the officers' quarters. He knew humans valued their leaders. Killing an officer would damage morale. He found Maya's quarters and ripped the door open with his bare hands. Inside, huddled behind the bed, was Lyra. Ember stood in front of her, small but defiant. The Krell warrior laughed. He had expected a human commander, not a child and a pet. This would be easy. He raised his weapon, a massive gun that would turn them both to ash. Ember breathed fire, but it washed over the Krell's armor without effect. The warrior took aim. Then Maya crashed through the doorway like a meteor. She had fought through 3 decks when she realized where the Krell was going. Her armor was dented and scorched. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. She was exhausted and wounded, but she did not slow down. She hit the Krell warrior from behind with her full weight. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and fury. The Krell was bigger and stronger, but Maya fought with desperate rage. She had promised to protect Lyra. She would die before she broke that promise. The fight was savage. The Krell warrior landed blows that would have killed a weaker human. Maya's ribs cracked. Her arm broke. But she kept fighting. She got her knife into a gap in his armor and drove it deep. The Krell roared and threw her across the room. Maya hit the wall hard and slumped down. The Krell warrior stumbled toward her, bleeding but still alive. He raised his weapon for a final shot. But he had forgotten about Ember. The small Strix launched himself at the warrior's face with a shriek of rage. His claws found the soft spots around the eyes. His teeth sank into exposed flesh. The Krell warrior screamed and tried to pull him off, but Ember held on with all his strength. Maya used those precious seconds. She forced her broken body to move one more time. Her knife found the Krell's throat and ended him. Silence fell. The Krell warrior was dead. Maya collapsed against the wall, barely conscious. Her vision was going dark around the edges. She could hear Lyra crying but could not see her clearly anymore. With her last bit of strength, Maya whispered words that would change everything between them. She promised Lyra she was safe now. She promised she would always protect her. Then darkness took her. Lyra knelt beside Maya's broken body and felt terror like she had never known. This human, this warrior, this person who looked like a monster had nearly died to save her. Maya had taken wounds that would have killed most beings just to keep a promise to an alien child she barely knew. Lyra placed her small hands on Maya's chest and did something she had never done before. Velkari had healing abilities, but they were weak and required training. Lyra was just a child and had never been taught properly. But desperation gave her strength. She poured her energy into Maya, knitting broken bones and closing bleeding wounds. It was not perfect and it drained Lyra completely. But it was enough. Maya's breathing steadied. Her heart kept beating. She would live. When Maya woke up hours later in the medical bay, the first thing she saw was Lyra sleeping in a chair beside her bed. The child's tiny fingers were wrapped around Maya's hand. Ember was curled around both of them, keeping watch. Something shifted in that moment. Maya realized that she had not just saved a frightened alien child. She had found family, and Lyra realized that monsters were not defined by how scary they looked, but by what they chose to do with their strength. The little alien girl who had once feared the human warrior now slept peacefully beside her, trusting completely. And Maya, who had thought her heart was too scarred to love again, felt something warm bloom in her chest. Outside, the Krell threat was growing. War was coming on a scale neither species could imagine. But in this quiet moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was that a promise had been kept and a bond had been forged that would not easily break. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within weeks, both the Velkari and the Krell learned that a Velkari child had survived aboard a human vessel. For very different reasons, both species wanted her back. The Velkari sent an envoy to the Valiant. She arrived on a beautiful ship that made human vessels look crude by comparison. Her name was Celeste, and she was a commander in what remained of the Velkari fleet. She was tall and elegant like all her kind, with hair the color of moonlight and eyes that held ancient wisdom. Celeste demanded to meet with Lyra immediately. Captain Hayes escorted her to Maya's quarters, where the child was learning to read human language. When Lyra saw another Velkari for the first time since the massacre, she froze. Memories of blood and death crashed over her. Celeste knelt down and spoke in the musical Velkari language. She explained that she had been sent by the High Council. They had thought all of the royal family was dead. Finding Lyra alive was a miracle. She needed to return home to her people. She was not just any child, but a princess, daughter of the High Counselor himself. Her people needed her. Lyra listened to all of this and then did something that shocked everyone in the room. She wrapped her arms around Maya's leg and refused to let go. In halting English mixed with Velkari words, she declared that Maya was her shield mother now. She would not leave her. Celeste's perfect face showed rare surprise. Shield mother was a sacred term among the Velkari. It meant a bond deeper than blood, a promise of protection that transcended everything else. Such bonds were rare and precious. That Lyra would claim a human as her shield mother was unprecedented. Impossible even, but Lyra was adamant. She felt safe with Maya in a way she had not felt safe since before the attacks. Maya had nearly died protecting her. Maya understood loss and grief the way other humans did not. Through their emotional bond, Lyra could feel Maya's absolute commitment to keeping her alive. That was worth more than royal titles or ancient traditions. Captain Hayes received orders from Earth Command. They wanted Lyra returned to the Velkari immediately. Humanity was not looking for new wars, and keeping an alien princess against her people's wishes would cause diplomatic problems. But the orders had not accounted for one thing: Lyra's own choice. Maya found herself in an impossible position. She was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. But she was also a shield mother now, and that meant something to her even if she did not fully understand it. She could see the terror in Lyra's eyes at the thought of leaving. After everything the child had been through, could Maya really force her to go? The decision was taken out of their hands by violence, as most decisions in war are. The Krell had been tracking the Velkari envoy ship. They knew Lyra was aboard the Valiant, and they wanted the last royal dead, a symbol of Velkari weakness eliminated forever. The Krell armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of them. 50 warships against the Valiant and Celeste's envoy vessel. The odds were hopeless. Captain Hayes ordered evacuation immediately. The crew rushed to the escape pods, but there were not enough for everyone. The military personnel would stay and fight to buy time for the civilians and non-essential crew to escape. Maya was ordered to get Lyra to a pod, but in the chaos and explosions they got separated from the main evacuation routes. A Krell missile struck near their position and sealed off the corridors behind them. Maya found herself trapped in a damaged section of the ship with Lyra, Ember, and 5 Marines. The walls were buckling. Life support was failing. They had maybe an hour before this section of the ship became a tomb. The only chance was desperate and dangerous. Someone small enough to fit through the damaged ventilation system could reach the ship's core and manually restart the defense grid. It might turn the tide of battle long enough for help to arrive. But the vents were barely 2 feet wide and filled with sharp edges, sparking wires and toxic fumes. Maya looked at Lyra and felt her heart break. The child was the only one small enough, but asking her to crawl through that nightmare alone was asking too much. Lyra was barely 5 years old by human standards. She was traumatized and terrified, and this was not her fight. Lyra looked back at Maya with those huge silver eyes and saw the desperation there. She felt Maya's emotions, the grief at having to ask this, the guilt at putting a child in danger, but also the absolute certainty that this was their only chance. If Lyra did not go, they would all die here. The little Velkari princess made a decision that would echo through history. She stood up as tall as her small frame allowed and said she would do it. Her voice shook, but her resolve did not. Maya was her shield mother. That meant Lyra trusted her completely. If Maya said this was necessary, then Lyra would be brave. Ember went with her, of course. The small Strix could fit through the vents, and his glowing scales would provide light in the darkness. Maya gave Lyra her personal communicator so they could stay in contact. Then she watched the child and her dragon disappear into the vent shaft. What followed was the longest hour of Maya's life. She and her Marines held the position against Krell warriors who were trying to breach their section. They fought with everything they had, knowing that every second they bought was a second Lyra needed. The Marines fell one by one, giving their lives to hold the line. Through the communicator, Maya could hear Lyra's frightened breathing as she crawled through the vents. She talked to the child constantly, keeping her calm and focused. She told her stories about Earth, about her sister Sophie and the games they used to play, about anything that might distract Lyra from the terror of what she was doing. Lyra crawled through darkness and danger, guided by Ember's light. Sharp metal cut her hands and knees. Sparking wires shocked her. Toxic fumes made her dizzy. But she kept going because Maya needed her to, because the Marines were dying to protect her. Because she had learned from humans that sometimes being brave meant being terrified and doing what needed to be done anyway. She reached the core with minutes to spare. The defense grid controls were designed for adult Velkari engineers, and Lyra was just a child. But she had watched her father work on ships before the war. She remembered some of it. With Ember's help and Maya's guidance through the communicator, she managed to restart the systems. The Valiant's weapons came back online. Shields powered up just as a Krell missile was about to strike the command deck. The tide of battle shifted. The human ship was no longer helpless prey, but a wounded predator fighting back. Then something miraculous happened. Celeste's envoy ship had not fled. Instead, she had called for emergency reinforcements. 3 Velkari warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and joined the fight. Their weapons were different from human guns, beams of pure energy that cut through Krell armor like paper. Together, the human and Velkari forces drove the Krell back. It was the first time the two species had fought side by side, and it was devastatingly effective. Human aggression and Velkari precision combined into something the Krell had not expected. The battle ended with the Krell retreating, leaving dozens of damaged ships behind. But the cost was terrible. Half of the Valiant's crew was dead or wounded. Of Maya's 5 Marines, only 1 survived. And Maya herself had taken a shot to the chest that should have killed her. They found her collapsed in the corridor, barely breathing. Her armor had absorbed most of the blast, but her injuries were critical. Lyra emerged from the vents covered in blood and burns and crawled to Maya's side. She refused to leave even as medics tried to carry Maya to the medical bay. The image of the small alien child clinging to the dying human warrior spread across both species' communication networks. It became a symbol of something neither civilization had words for yet. A bond that transcended species and logic, love in its purest form. Lyra rode in the medical transport with Maya, her small body pressed against the unconscious warrior's side. Ember curled around them both, and as Maya fought for her life in surgery, Lyra did something that amazed the Velkhari doctors. She channeled her healing energy into Maya again, stronger than before because desperation had unlocked abilities she did not know she had. Maya survived, though she would carry scars from this battle forever. When she finally woke days later, she found Lyra asleep in her usual chair. But this time the child was not alone. Celeste sat on the other side of the bed with tears in her ancient eyes. The Velkhari commander spoke quietly. She said she understood now why Lyra had chosen a human as her shield mother. She had watched Maya and her Marines sacrifice everything to protect one small alien child. She had seen humans and Velkhari fight together and win against impossible odds. She had witnessed the bond between warrior and princess. Celeste made an announcement that would change everything. The Velkhari High Council recognized Maya as Lyra's shield mother under their most sacred laws. More than that, they proposed an alliance between humanity and the Velkhari. The Krell would not stop until both species were destroyed. Together they might survive. Divided, they would fall. And so the war entered a new phase, not just humanity fighting for territory or the Velkhari fleeing extinction, but 2 species standing together. It started with a frightened child finding courage in darkness, with a warrior learning that protecting one life could matter as much as winning 1,000 battles. Lyra climbed into Maya's bed, and the alliance between humanity and the Velkhari was easier to announce than to build. Both species looked at each other with distrust despite the treaty. The Velkhari saw humans as violent barbarians who solved every problem with weapons. The humans saw the Velkhari as soft pacifists who had let themselves be nearly wiped out. Military training bases were established where both species would learn to fight together. It was a disaster from day one. Human soldiers were too aggressive, charging into situations where Velkhari warriors preferred patience and precision. Velkhari fighters were too cautious, hesitating when humans needed immediate action. Communication broke down constantly because emotions meant different things to each species. Maya was assigned to lead the first truly integrated combat squadron. She had become famous across both civilizations as the human who protected the Velkhari princess. If anyone could make this work, Earth Command believed it was her. But even Maya struggled with the cultural differences. Lyra insisted on being part of the training. Celeste and the Velkhari Council were horrified at the idea. She was a child and a princess. Putting her in combat situations was unthinkable. But Lyra argued with the stubbornness she had learned from humans. She understood both species in ways neither fully understood themselves. She had felt human rage and Velkhari compassion. She knew how to bridge the gap. There was another reason Lyra needed to be involved. The Velkhari had a ceremony they wanted Maya to undergo. As Lyra's official shield mother under their law, Maya was entitled to a Strix of her own, a bonded dragon that would connect her more deeply to both Lyra and the Velkhari people. The ceremony took place in a sacred chamber aboard the Velkhari flagship. Dozens of Strix eggs rested in nests of glowing crystals. They were rare and precious, given only to those deemed worthy. Maya stood in the center of the chamber, feeling completely out of place. She was a soldier, not whatever mystical guardian this ceremony required. Celeste explained the process. The eggs would sense her emotional resonance. If one responded, it would hatch and bond with her instantly. The bond would be permanent and deep, connecting Maya to the Strix through thoughts and feelings. Many candidates were rejected by the eggs. It was not an insult, but simply meant the match was not right. Maya approached the eggs slowly. She could feel them somehow, a strange warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Lyra stood beside her, encouraging her through their shield bond. Ember watched from a perch above, his eyes reflecting the crystal light. One egg began to glow brighter than the others. It was larger than the rest, and its shell shimmered with silver patterns. Cracks appeared along its surface. Maya reached out instinctively, and the egg rolled into her hands. It was warm and vibrating with life. The shell broke apart, and a small dragon emerged. It was different from Ember. Where Ember's scales were red and gold, this Strix had scales of deep silver that seemed to hold starlight. Its eyes were the same silver as Lyra's. It was beautiful and fierce, and in that moment Maya felt something lock into place in her mind. The bond formed instantly. Maya gasped as emotions and sensations flooded through her. She could feel the Strix's curiosity and hunger and wild joy at finally being born. She could sense its absolute loyalty to her. And through the dragon she felt an echo of Lyra's presence stronger than ever before. Maya named the Strix Ash, after the ashes her old life had become when she lost her sister. From those ashes something new had grown. The small dragon chirped and climbed onto her shoulder, nuzzling against her neck. Ember flew down to investigate, and the two Strix touched noses in greeting. The bond changed Maya in ways she did not fully understand yet. She could sense emotions more clearly now, similar to how Valkyrie experienced the world. It was overwhelming at first, but it also gave her insight she had never had before. She began to understand why the Valkyrie struggled with human aggression. She could feel the pain it caused their empathic senses. Training resumed with Maya now bonded to Ash. The improvement was immediate. She could sense when her mixed unit was about to break down before it happened. She could feel the Valkyrie warrior's discomfort with human tactics and adjust accordingly. She could read her human soldier's frustration and address it before it turned to anger. But understanding did not prevent disaster. During a training exercise that was supposed to simulate combat, something went horribly wrong. The safety protocols failed, and live ammunition got mixed with training rounds. When the exercise began, real bullets started flying. Lyra was in the middle of it. She had been demonstrating Valkyrie movement techniques to a group of human soldiers when the shooting started. Maya felt it through their bond, the spike of Lyra's terror. She ran faster than she thought possible, but she was not fast enough. A bullet meant for a training drone ricocheted off a wall and struck Lyra in the shoulder. The little princess went down with a cry that Maya felt as much as heard. Time seemed to slow as Maya watched Lyra fall. All her promises and protections had not been enough. She had put the child in danger, and now Lyra was hurt. Maya reached Lyra in seconds and covered her body with her own. Ash and Ember created a wall of fire around them to prevent any more shots from getting through. Medics rushed in, but the damage was done. Lyra's shoulder was shattered. She would live, but she would carry the scar forever. In the hospital, Maya sat beside Lyra's bed and felt like she had failed completely. She had brought the child into a war zone. She had allowed her to participate in dangerous training. What kind of protector let their charge get shot? Lyra woke up and saw Maya's guilt written across her face. The little princess reached out with her good arm and took Maya's hand. She spoke in careful English that she had been practicing. She said Maya had not failed her. Maya had taught her to be brave, to stand up instead of hiding. The wound was not Maya's fault, but the fault of whoever sabotaged the safety protocols. Investigation proved Lyra right. Someone had deliberately caused the malfunction. A human soldier who did not believe in the alliance had wanted to prove that Valkyrie were too weak for combat. He had not meant to hurt Lyra specifically, but he did not care that a child was in the exercise. The incident forced both species to confront hard truths. Not everyone wanted this alliance to work. There were humans who saw the Valkyrie as useless. There were Valkyrie who saw humans as monsters. Building trust would take more than treaties and training exercises. But something unexpected came from the tragedy. Lyra refused to quit. Despite her injury and fear, she returned to training as soon as she could move her arm again. She stood in front of both species and made a declaration that shocked everyone. She said she would lead the joint forces. Not as a figurehead or a symbol, but as an actual commander. Maya would be her second in command, and together they would show both species how to fight as one. The Valkyrie Council was outraged. Earth Command was skeptical. She was barely more than a baby by either species' standards. But Lyra had advantages neither species could match. She could sense emotions and read intentions through her empathic abilities. Through her bond with Ember and the growing network of Strix, she had unprecedented tactical awareness. She understood both human aggression and Valkyrie caution. She was uniquely qualified to bridge the gap. More importantly, both species respected her. The humans saw a child who had crawled through hell to save their ship. The Velkari saw their princess who had survived genocide and chosen to fight instead of hiding. When Lyra spoke, people listened. Against all logic and military tradition, the Alliance accepted her as commander. But everyone knew this was a gamble. If she succeeded, she would unite two species. If she failed, the Alliance would crumble and both civilizations would fall to the Krell alone. Maya stood beside her shield daughter and made her own promise. She would support Lyra in this insane plan. She would teach her everything about strategy and combat that humans had learned through centuries of warfare, and she would protect her from those who would use her age and innocence against her. The war was about to enter its most crucial phase. The Krell had been building their forces and were preparing a final assault on the Velkari homeworld. If that planet fell, the last major Velkari population would be wiped out. The Alliance had to stop them. Everything depended on it. Lyra stood on the bridge of a new hybrid warship, built by both species working together. It was called the Dawn's Promise, and it represented everything the Alliance hoped to become. Human strength and Velkari elegance combined into something greater than either alone. Maya stood at her right side as second in command. Ash perched on her shoulder while Ember curled around Lyra's feet. Celeste commanded the Velkari fleet while Human Admiral Kate Morrison commanded the Human Armada. All of them looked to the small princess who was about to lead them into the largest battle either species had ever fought. Lyra looked out at the stars and felt the weight of two civilizations resting on her small shoulders. She was terrified, but she was also determined. Maya had taught her that fear did not mean weakness. It meant you understood the stakes. And Lyra understood perfectly well that if they lost this battle, everyone she loved would die. But she also understood something else. She was not alone. She had her shield mother beside her. She had Ember and Ash. She had two entire. The Krell Armada appeared in the sky above Velkar Prime like a swarm of locusts. 300 warships against the combined human Velkari fleet of barely 100. The odds were worse than anyone had hoped, but better than they had feared. The Alliance had to make every ship count. Lyra stood on the bridge of the Dawn's Promise and felt the emotions of thousands of warriors flowing through her empathic senses. Fear and determination mixed together in equal measure. Everyone knew this was the final battle. Win here or lose everything. Maya was at her tactical station coordinating fighter squadrons. Ash rode on her shoulder, his silver scales gleaming under the ship lights. Ember was curled at Lyra's feet, his presence a constant comfort. Around them, crew members from both species worked together in ways that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The battle began with a fury that shook space itself. Krell warships opened fire with massive cannons that could crack planets. The Alliance fleet scattered and reformed, using tactics that blended human aggression with Velkari precision. Human fighters flew in tight formation with Velkari ships, covering each other's weaknesses, but the Krell had numbers and they pressed their advantage. For every Krell ship destroyed, two more took its place. The Alliance fleet was being overwhelmed despite fighting with everything they had. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Thousands died in seconds. The battle was turning into a massacre. Lyra closed her eyes and reached out through her connection to the Strix network. There were hundreds of bonded dragons spread throughout the fleet. Each one was connected to a warrior. Each one could sense emotions and share them. Through this network, Lyra could feel the entire battlefield. She made a decision that went against every tactical principle Maya had taught her. Instead of pulling back to regroup, Lyra ordered every ship to push forward, straight into the heart of the Krell Armada. It looked like suicide, but Lyra had sensed something through the Strix network. The Krell were confident they had already won. They were not expecting the Alliance to attack with such desperation. Maya trusted her shield daughter despite every military instinct screaming this was wrong. She relayed the orders and watched as the fleet charged forward. The Krell were caught off guard for precious seconds. In those seconds, the Alliance broke through their front line. But breaking through was only the first step. Lyra had something else planned, something the Velkari had been preparing in secret. All across the fleet, young Velkari children emerged from protected chambers. They were the ones too young to fight but old enough to have empathic abilities. Under Lyra's guidance, they performed a ritual that had not been attempted in generations. They linked their minds together and channeled pure emotional resonance into the human warriors. Suddenly, every human soldier felt their reflexes sharpen, their aim improved, their coordination became perfect. It was as if the Velkari children were guiding their hands through pure emotion and will. The tide of battle shifted. Human Marines fought with enhanced abilities that made them nearly unstoppable. Velkari shields held longer because human engineers knew exactly when to divert power. It was not just an alliance anymore. It was a true symbiosis of two species fighting as one organism. But victory had a price. The ritual was draining the Velkari children rapidly. They could not maintain it forever. Lyra felt their exhaustion through the network and knew they had maybe an hour before the children collapsed. They needed to end this battle fast. The Krell flagship loomed at the center of their formation. It was a massive dreadnought 10 times the size of any Alliance ship. Its commander was Warlord Draxul, the same Krell who had ordered the genocide of Lyra's family. He had personally led the attack that killed her parents. Draxul sent a transmission that boomed across all frequencies. He offered Lyra a choice. Surrender herself and he would let the Alliance fleet retreat. Fight and he would destroy every ship and then glass Velkar Prime until nothing lived. He gave her 1 hour to decide. Maya immediately said no. They would find another way. But Lyra understood that there was no other way. The children were exhausted. The fleet was battered. And Draxul would never stop hunting her people as long as she lived. This had to end here. Lyra announced she would meet Draxul in single combat. Not ship to ship, but face to face on the surface of Velkar Prime. Velkari tradition allowed for such duels to settle wars. Draxul laughed but accepted. He relished the idea of personally killing the last Velkari royal. Maya tried to stop Lyra. She argued and pleaded and finally ordered her shield daughter to stand down, but Lyra refused. She was no longer the terrified child Maya had found on that dead ship. She had grown strong under Maya's protection. She had learned courage from watching humans fight. Now it was time to use everything she had learned. The duel would take place in the ruins of Lyra's ancestral home. The Krell had destroyed most of it during their first attack, but the main hall still stood. Lyra descended to the surface riding on Ember's back. The small Strix had grown larger over the months, now the size of a horse instead of a dog. He was still small compared to Krell war beasts, but he was fast and fierce. Maya followed on Ash, refusing to let Lyra face this alone. If this was a duel, then Maya would provide support. That was what shield mothers did. Around them, both fleets held their fire and watched. This moment would decide everything. Draxul arrived in a massive war mech that stood 30 feet tall. It was armed with weapons that could level buildings and armor that could withstand ship cannons. Beside it, Lyra looked impossibly small and fragile. A child on a dragon facing a giant in a machine designed to kill gods. The duel began. Draxul opened fire with everything he had. Ember darted and weaved through the weapon's fire with incredible speed. Lyra clung to his back and reached out with her empathic abilities. She had learned from Maya that size and strength were not the only weapons. Sometimes the smallest warrior had the biggest advantage. Draxul was confident he had already won. His weapons were superior. His armor was impenetrable. But confidence made him predictable. Lyra could sense his intentions before he acted. She knew where he would aim and dodged before he fired. Ember breathed fire at weak points in the mech's armor, slowly wearing it down. Maya circled above on Ash, providing covering fire and watching for openings. She saw what Lyra was doing. Not trying to overpower the warlord, but wearing him down, making him angry and careless. It was a human tactic applied with Velkari precision. Then Lyra did something nobody expected. She stopped running and landed Ember directly in front of the war mech. She reached out with every bit of empathic power she possessed and forced Draxul to feel something his species had evolved to suppress. Emotion. She made him feel the fear of every Velkari he had killed. The pain of every family torn apart. The grief of entire worlds burning. Krell were bred to be emotionless warriors, but they still had feelings buried deep. Lyra dragged all of that to the surface and made Draxul experience it at once. The warlord screamed. His war mech stumbled as his concentration broke. In that moment of weakness, Maya struck. Ash dove from above, breathing silver fire that melted through the mech's damaged armor. Maya fired her rifle at the exposed core. Each shot precise and deadly. The war mech collapsed. Draxul tried to escape, but Ember was faster. The Strix's claws found the warlord's throat and ended him. The architect of genocide died in the ruins of the home he had destroyed. Silence fell across the battlefield. The Krell fleet saw their leader fall and something broke in their formation. They had been so certain of victory. Now their greatest warrior had been killed by a child. The Krell valued strength above all else, and they had just witnessed true strength. The Krell fleet retreated. Some ships stayed to fight and were destroyed, but most fled into faster-than-light travel. The battle was over. Velkar Prime was saved. The Alliance had won. Lyra collapsed from exhaustion. Maya caught her before she hit the ground and held the small princess close. Around them, both human and Velkari forces landed and began to celebrate. But Maya only cared about Lyra. Her shield daughter had survived. That was all that mattered. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. The alliance between humanity and the Velkari became permanent. Other species who had been hiding from the Krell came forward asking to join. What had started as a desperate partnership became the foundation of something greater. Lyra recovered, but she was different now. Older somehow, despite being only a child still. She had seen war and death. She had killed to protect her people, but she had also learned that war did not define you. What mattered was what you built after. A ceremony was held on Velkar Prime. Both species gathered to honor their fallen and celebrate their victory. Lyra stood on a stage in front of thousands and spoke about fear becoming trust and enemies becoming family. She talked about how the smallest person could change the course of history, if they had courage and someone who believed in them. When the speeches ended, Maya found Lyra sitting alone looking at the stars. The Admiral sat beside her former charge and smiled. She asked if Lyra was okay. The little princess nodded and did something she had been doing since that first day on the Valiant. She climbed into Maya's jacket pocket. It was a tight fit now because Lyra had grown some